with the ABCs, A, of course, American made. In 1964, Lyndon B. Johnson mandated bourbon was the official spirit of the United States. And in that, he declared that it had to be made in the U.S. or it's not bourbon. But what a lot of people don't know about us and in this area is that this is the area LBJ grew up in. So he was born and raised just down the road in Albert and went to the one-room schoolhouse. It's about 5 miles from here. It's currently cared for by a local schoolhouse historical society, which is pretty cool. Then he moved to Johnson City, Texas, about 15 minutes from here, and was raised in that area from, I want to say, probably middle school on, high school on. So pretty cool. That's part of the reason why we wanted to be right here in this area. Dan Garrison, of course, was born and raised out here, but then from there came a little bit closer. He was out in the Austin area, and so was his wife. And so they came further out here, bought this property, and decided to be right here where LBJ was from. So cool little piece of history in that. With B, the barrel, of course, the barrel has to be brand new charred not American oak, but it has to be brand new charred oak. And we use American white oak, all from forests in Missouri, of course. But in our process of figuring out what we wanted to do and how we wanted to go about all of this, we realized that we couldn't just be like Kentucky and use a barrel stave that was 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch in thickness. When we tried that our first summer, we lost a lot of bourbon to the pressure that builds up in those barrels. It ended up causing our barrels to break. Those barrels staves weren't thick enough to withstand that pressure. And so our barrel staves are actually 1 inch to 1.25 inches thick, twice as thick as what Kentucky uses. It's a necessity for us. When it comes to the char side, people do all kinds of different chars. They'll usually give a level of char they want between a 1 and a 4. We actually give specifics on timing because 53 seconds at 1 cooperage could be a level 3, but it could be a level 4 at another cooperage. So we're very specific in the time that we do. Over the years, we've grown and we've learned and changed in what we use, but we have a very specific barrel recipe that we absolutely love to use, and we purchase barrels from multiple different cooperages. So we're going to use barrels from Barrel Mill, Black Swan, Kelvin Cooperage, and then ISC, Independent Stave Company. So 2 of those are from Kentucky and 2 are from Minnesota. Now, of course, the rest is kind of common knowledge when it comes to the barrel, but C is for corn. Corn has to be at least 51% of your grain recipe, but we use 74% #1 food grade white corn in our recipe. And how that came about was we actually ordered yellow corn, received the wrong shipment. It was going to cost us more to ship it back than to keep it. And so we decided to keep it, try it, and found out it was obviously going to produce a lot more sugar in the long run for our fermentation process. So we came about doing #1 food grade white corn unintentionally, which is pretty cool. It helps us in our cook process quite a bit, gives us a much higher sugar content. 15% soft red winter wheat. We tried to grow our own wheat, but we found out we're terrible farmers. We're not good farmers whatsoever. So we stopped doing that. We make bourbon for a living, and that's where we're going to keep that. And then 11% malted barley. All 3 of our grains all come from Texas. So as of 2019 is when we stopped using barley from outside, and that was actually January of 2019 that we started using barley from Texas. So D is, of course, for distilled, distillation proof. When we pull it off the still, we can't pull it off higher than 160 proof, but we pull ours off between 130 and 140 because we found that's our sweet spot. That's where you can really taste all those grains, where we really like that white dog flavor the best. And if you don't have a good flavor going in, you're not going to have a great flavor coming out. So. E, entry proof. When we enter it into the barrel, it of course has to be under 125 proof. We usually put it in the barrel right close to there, but it can vary depending upon what we want our end result to be. So there's all kinds of different proofs we're going to put it in. We do try to be consistent depending upon the product line. F is for fill. When we fill the bottle, we can't fill the bottle with anything under an 80 proof. Most of ours, our standard is 94 proof. So single barrel and small batch, that's what you're going to find the majority of those at. But 80 proof is, we only have one that's an 80 proof, and that's going to be our honey-dew bourbon. It's a honey-infused bourbon. Now, when it comes to 94 and why we chose that, we found that at about 94 proof, 94, 95, you put an ice cube in, you can still appreciate it at 80 proof. It's still going to be what you want it to be as a bourbon. But then 94 in particular came about because our mentor, Elmer T. Lee, passed away at the age of 94. And so that was a bit of an homage to our mentor. G, of course, genuine bourbon's the honest spirit. So we want to keep it as it is. A lot of people question us in regards to our honeydew bourbon, our honey infused bourbon, and our Guadalupe that's finished in a port cask. Some of them question us on our Laguna Madre, finished in French Limousine oak casks, and now, of course, our Ladybird, which is finished in cognac. It's the honeydew at cask strength, finished in cognac. However, it's bourbon. As long as you start to finish, make it that process in following the rules of the ABCs. But then from there, you want to make certain that you clearly label your bottles with what you've done to it. That's how we're able to still call our product a bourbon. We're not anything else. That's all we're ever going to make, all we're ever going to sell. So you'll never see us sell our White Dog, because that's actually a promise we made to Elmer, is that we would never sell anything but bourbon. And we'll never sell anything but bourbon made on this property. Grain to glass from the very beginning, we've always done everything on this property, which is one of the things that makes us so special. So. That being said, another cool fact that a lot of people don't know is in Texas, of course, our angel share is a lot higher. In Kentucky, they lose about 3 to 3.5% to angel share every year. We lose closer to 14% to angel share. So that's another big reason why our bourbon is not aged anywhere near as long as theirs is. Of course, the intense heat out here makes the aging process go a lot faster. So that helps us quite a bit. But in that, of course, we lose a lot to evaporation, and we don't necessarily want to lose all of it, so we're going to take it out a little bit earlier. It's got some awesome flavor. Our Cowboy bourbon is actually aged we call it hot boxing, but we're going to put it into a metal container, metal building, and really force that heat to come out a lot more and create a even bolder flavor. So we're going to lose even more with the Cowboy bourbon so that we can get those intense, beautiful flavors that we have come to know and love about Cowboy. So that being said, that's our basics on what we typically explain in our tours and where we go from there. From here, we will go ahead and we'll go check out the cookhouse. So let's go.
Hot boxing, isn't that when you fart in a car?
We're not going to talk about that. You do what you do on your time.
Am I wrong? Am I wrong?
It's also like blankets.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Cut that out.
That's the only thing
I'm going to make her do so many things.
Okay, come here.
So beautiful.
So despite our insane growth, I'm always going to probably start right here, because to me, this is where it all starts. And what's crazy is to know that in the last year, this building has doubled in size. This entire half of the building that we just walked through was not here. They started it last January, finished it a couple months ago, and have started to ferment in these fermentation tanks. But what I'm actually paying attention to right now is outside of the building through these windows, if you want to take a look. These are our grain silos. So when I started in 2018, we would have 1, maybe 2 grain trucks deliver every week. And we had a completely manual system. So our mash cooks and distillers would have to climb up a ladder that was on the side of the building all the way to the roof, because the hopper at the bottom, once it was filled, when we turned on that pump, once it was filled and it would go through the pipe, it would drop through the roof of the building into our hammer mill to grind up all that grain. But in 2019, we went automated. And so what happens now is upstairs we have miniature silos, and those miniature silos are on scales. When those scales drop below a certain weight, it's gonna kick on the rest of the system. When that system kicks on, again, same thing happens, just not manually. We don't have to go and physically monitor it like we used to. So grain's gonna drop into the hopper at the bottom of the silo, it'll pump it through the pipes into the hammer mill, and then it'll go up into that miniature silo until it's at the correct weight again, full of ground up grain. Now, again, corn, wheat, and barley, those are our grains. We receive way more trucks than we used to. I wanna say we probably receive 5 trucks a week, and that's in almost, we're going on 6 years that I've been here, 5.5, 6 years that I've been here. So we've seen a ton of growth. We're producing, I'm gonna guess 8 times more than we did when I started here 5.5 years ago. So we've definitely seen a lot of growth, but this is where it all starts. So it's important to me to always start out here. Fun fact, for those of you who have never had the opportunity to go to Kentucky and see what it's like out there, you may not realize that Kentucky is covered with what looks like dirt. Everywhere around distilleries is black. So you can see right here on the side of the silo, it looks black right there. That's not dirt. That's actually a whiskey yeast mold. It's naturally attracted to whiskey yeast, and you can't do anything about it. So it covers all the buildings, the trees, everything out here. It's always funny when you see new buildings, you can tell which buildings are new versus the old ones, because the old ones have a nice thick layer of that whiskey yeast mold on it, but it's actually edible, it's not harmful. So that's always a fun little fact I like to put out there, because people are like, oh my gosh, you're breathing in mold. No, you're not, it's okay. I mean, you might be, but it's not gonna hurt you, you're gonna be fine. Over the years, it's actually funny, a lot of times our tour guides would walk up, swipe their finger through it, and see, it's fine, you're okay. I was never quite convinced that that was completely safe.
Like on The Last of Us.
Right. So once that grain goes up into the miniature silos upstairs, we're gonna go ahead and pump it into our cookers, but we'll come around here so you can see our cookers. And up until recently, there was a wall right here as well. So this was a wall separating these 2 rooms, and then there was a wall right there because that was the outside of the building at that point. But these 2 cookers here, 500-gallon cookers, and this is a 1,000-gallon cooker. All the numbers I'm gonna give you are for the 500-gallon cookers. And forgive me if they're not exact. I am not a mash cook. I've been around long enough to kind of know what's going on, but don't jump on me if I'm a little bit off. So they're gonna start their day by filling these up with 300 gallons of well water. And this is the only place on property you're gonna see us use our well water, because the well water here is so hard. There's so much limestone and calcium in there that it really is too difficult for us to use use that water through all of our pipes all over property. But the calcium and all the nutrients that are in that hard well water we have provide an excellent fermentation experience for our yeast. So we really want to make certain that we use it here. So again, 300 gallons of well water, they're going to bring it up to a boil, then they're going to drop in approximately 900 pounds of corn, that #1 food grade white corn. They're going to cook it for about 30 minutes, and all the starch from the corn will be released into the water. And once that corn is done cooking, they're going to drop the temperature just a little bit. Then they'll drop in about 200 pounds of that soft red winter wheat, and they'll let that cook for 20 minutes. They're going to drop the temperature one more time, and they're going to drop in about 100 pounds of malted barley. When they do this step, they have to really pay attention, because as that barley goes in, the barley is, in and of itself, releases an enzyme called alpha amylase. That's why you malt barley, is to have that enzyme be released. Alpha amylase converts starch to sugar for our bodies to process, but also for our yeast to process. So that alpha amylase, as it starts converting all that starch to sugar, it almost becomes like glue in that cooker. So when they're mixing that in, they have to really pay attention. The noise we're hearing in the background right now, that's a boat motor is what we call it. It's just a big motor on top, and there's a paddle inside helping stir it. But they're gonna actually take a big paddle and assist it when they pump in that malted barley. They'll cook that malted barley for about 20 minutes, and then they're gonna check the Brix level, the sugar content. Most distilleries get around 18, 19 Brix. We average 22 Brix of sugar in our 500-gallon cookers, and we have gotten up to 26 Brix in our 1,000-gallon cooker. And again, so much of that comes from using 74% of our recipe as #1 food grade white corn. They're going to drop the temperature one final time after they've checked their Brix readings. When they drop it, they're going to drop it to around 75, 76 degrees before they pump it into a fermentation tank. Now, like I said already, those fermentation tanks that we walked by earlier, those real big ones, those are brand new. But this is what we've used over the last few years. These are 500-gallon cookers. We've got day shift and night shift, and of course, day shift and night shift for these ones over here. And then these are 2,000-gallon fermentation tanks. And that, of course, correlates with our 1,000-gallon tank. They'll cook on that twice before they can fill one of these and drop in the yeast. But when we start to pump over all the mash from that cooker into one of these fermentation tanks, we're going to pitch in the yeast right away. And as soon as that yeast touches that mash, it's now known as distiller's beer. So all we're doing over here is making a bunch of beer. Our fermentation process up until recently has always been a 4-day open air fermentation, really aggressive. People have asked over the years, why do you guys do open air? Aren't you worried about contamination? And we're really not, because it's such an aggressive form of fermentation that there's not really much time for anything to manifest in there. It's not like beer where it's gonna change the flavor profile. Plus, if anything does manifest in there, it's all gonna get cooked off in the still anyways. So we're not worried about that open air side of things. During those 4 days, there are a couple things we're monitoring. Yeast, being living, breathing microorganisms, they provide a couple of byproducts. So we're gonna, of course, monitor this room's CO2 level. We wanna make certain we're gonna still be able to breathe, and it's not gonna be too much of an issue. It's not gonna be dangerous for anybody. We're gonna monitor the temperature, because yeast provide their own heat. They create their own heat. So we're never worried about them getting too cold. We are worried about them getting too hot. And what we've always done for these tanks is a super high-tech process to cool them down if needed. They die off at about 98 degrees, so that's why we would need to cool them down. High-tech process though, we're gonna pitch in a 20-pound bag of ice. One 20-pound bag per 500 gallons equals about 1 degree. So we'll pitch in 4 or 5 bags of ice, stir it up, monitor it really close. The other thing that we're going to monitor is, of course, the alcohol content, that Brix level as well. At the beginning of the 4 days, we start with, again, about 22 Brix of sugar, but at the end of the 4 days, it's gonna drop down to about 8 Brix. And in exchange, we now have roughly a 14% ABV beer. So, pretty awesome. Most breweries can't accomplish that in a month and a half, and we do it in 4 days. But that's the difference between whiskey yeast and brewer's yeast. So, whiskey yeast alone, there's over 60 strains. And fun fact, that's one of the few things that separates every distillery from the others, is that it's the only thing that you don't have to report to the government is your yeast. And it accounts for approximately 10% of your overall flavor profile. So, come here. Really sweet.
Yeah, it is.
So this one's brand new. This one's only been in here. This one's finished activating, so it's going. When it activates, it gets really foamy. It's kind of fun. I was surprised the first time I saw it activate, that yeast get going and wake up. But the whole top layer will just be like bubbles, like a bubble bath. And that's just the carbon dioxide being released, obviously. But this one's brand new, so it's probably about a day and a half old based on what it tasted like to me. Let's see. Let me see when this one is. Ah, see, look. They just put this one in here last night.
Okay.
Yeah. So, last night they did this one. This one's gonna taste a little different.
Yeah.
A little more sour, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it'll get more and progressively more sour the older it is.
So the older it gets, the sourer it will be.
Yes.
Okay.
And ultimately, we want to make that yeast stretch the whole time. We want to get as much alcohol as possible. We want it to eat all of the sugar and convert it all to alcohol for us. So that's why we monitor the temperature so closely. But by the end of the 4 days, you're going to know it's done because it's not bubbling whatsoever anymore.
Okay.
So, yeah. Now, once it's done in here, in the bottom of each of these, you're going to see a hole. You're going to see a hole. Okay? There's a drain in the bottom of each of these. Okay? And what they're going to do is they're going to turn on a pump, and they're going to pump it all out, hose it out. And one of the questions we get is, well, doesn't that change the flavor profile, adding water to it as you go? Yes and no. We do a really heavy beer, which means there's a lot more grain in our grain to water ratio. And we do that intentionally so that we can add water throughout our process. So it's a very heavy beer. We're not worried about changing the flavor profile in that. But we'll pump all of it out from here directly into one of our stills next door. And that's where we're going to head next. Let's go.
Who's Sam?
That one.
Ah.
That's Sam. She is absolutely amazing. Sammy, how long have you been with us? 10 years? Almost 10 years she's been around. She's had quite a few articles written about her. She was one of the first female bourbon distillers.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I think the first Hispanic female bourbon distiller.
Wow.
So she's pretty amazing.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, she's super knowledgeable. She would probably be the other person I trust you with on this tour. Come on, let's go to the still house. Well, hello there. Good, how are you?
Just get a little cleanup. What's with
The microphone.
It's a microphone?
The microphone.
So somebody's hearing this conversation?
Correct. So be careful.
I'm staring at the microphone and not your boobs. What's going on, y'all? Hi,
Patrick, Landon, and Seth.
Hi, Seth Como.
They are with the San Angelo Whiskey Collective, and they asked me a couple months ago if they could come out and record and kind of get an idea of what we do out here, because a lot of their people in their group will never have the opportunity to come out here.
Why?
Because they don't travel, apparently.
I have a tractor. I can go get them.
Let's go get them.
Perfect. You got that
They
on
can
recording,
hop in the
right?
bed, right?
Perfect. Well, if you ever want me to come down and do an event, I'll grab a business card.
Yeah, would love to.
Yeah, there we go. So that's Dan Garrison. That's our owner, our founder. Absolutely amazing man. I love working with and for him. So, yeah. Good guy.
Yeah, thanks for having us out here.
When I started working out here, he
Thank
was
you, sir.
adamant that he had to be a part of all
Yeah, we
of
definitely.
these interviews. And so he was a part of my interview. I wasn't allowed to start until he met me and interviewed me as well.
I just saw that.
And he loved it. He loves doing stuff like that. He's a people person, if you can't tell. Definitely a great guy. He knows my kids by name and takes good care of all of us. So, yeah.
It's awesome how the organic nature of it's a community, right? It's a mess. Together and it's a mess. It's a mess. Organized mess that comes out in a magical.
What he means is organized chaos.
My goal today is to fix this shit. Clean it all up.
Oh,
This is a 20-year-old structure, you know, and it's like everything's dusty and gross, so make a master list of all the shit we need to fix. So.
Is that the goal for every day?
Pretty much. Well, it's not. I'm glad y'all are here.
Yeah, thanks, man.
fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, hon. Come on up.
Oh,
Go ahead, guys.
Okay.
Watch your head on that yellow beam up top, okay? Welcome to the Still House. Okay, so right now, our original still, that beautiful little thing in the middle, she's actually taken apart. They're doing some real deep cleaning, and so they've taken parts from her so they can clean them off, repair anything that might need to be repaired. So she doesn't quite look like herself, but she's our original still. We call her the Copper Cowgirl. She was built in the early 70s for the master distiller at Wild Turkey, and then he lost her in a horse bet in the late 70s to the master distiller at Buffalo Trace, Elmer T. Lee. Now, we obtained her from Elmer in the early 2000s when we were first getting started. Dan had a really good relationship with him, and he sold her to us, and she was the first little still that we decided to, yeah, she's taken apart, so she's not quite as tall as she normally is, but she's the first little still that we decided to go ahead and work off of. Little 100-gallon still made some absolutely beautiful white dog, and in the long run, some beautiful bourbon. But we decided we wanted to make direct replicas of her. So we reached out to Vendome Copper and Brass, and they created replicas of her in these two here. So we've got the Copper Cowgirl, and then we have Fat Man and Little Boy, and they were brought on in 2010, and they absolutely are incredible. These stills are all what we call a combination pot column still. And how these guys work right here is that in the bottom, there is actually a false bottom. On top of that false bottom, we're gonna pump all of that beer from next door, but underneath, we're gonna inject live steam. Now, ultimately, distillation is the separation of compounds at different boiling points. Water is going to distill or evaporate at about 212, but alcohol is closer to about 176. So we're gonna use that live steam underneath to heat it up to about 176 degrees, and then the vapor is going to go up the column. Now, you see those sight glasses on the front of the columns. Behind each sight glass is what looks like an upside down copper cup with holes in it. And that copper cup, as that vapor hits it, it's gonna cause that vapor to condense, because that copper cup is real cool. Then once it's done condensing, it'll re-evaporate, go up the column to the next copper cup, and recondense. So we've got a bunch of mini evaporations, condensations. When I think about distillation, I think about that cool little diagram we had in science class in 3rd grade, where it gave us that circle, the cycle of evaporation, condensation, precipitation. That's ultimately what we're doing in a still. It's just forcing that process. So it's gonna go all the way up the column, then it'll come down, and there's that thick tube on the side. It looks kind of black right now. That is the condenser. Within that condenser, there are a bunch of copper pipes. I think there's about 100 of them, possibly close to 200. Don't quote me on that one. But there's a bunch of copper pipes in there, and we're gonna flush those pipes with 45-degree chill water. And the purpose of that is to snap all the vapor back to a liquid. So it's gonna come down, the vapor's gonna come down that tube, snap all of it back to a liquid, and then it's gonna run down our product lines and up and out our spirit fountain, what you see right here, okay? That liquid coming out, that's our spirit fountain. And that's gonna be the white dog. That's a hydrometer that's floating in there. The hydrometer is going to tell us the proof. Now, a lot of distilleries don't have access to their spirit fountain. It's called a spirit safe. They don't allow access to it, but we do, because our master distiller feels the sign of a true distiller is somebody who can see, feel, smell, and taste the difference in the beginning, middle, and end of a run. So the heads, the hearts, and the tails. The heads and the tails are the bad alcohols you don't want to consume that can make you go blind, like what you see on moonshiners, right? But the hearts, that's what we want to save, and we want to be able to tell the difference in those 4 senses. So you're going to see all day long our distillers walk up, they're going to be looking at it, they're going to be touching it, smelling it, and tasting it, so they know where they're at in their run. We have gauges on everything, but you never know when a gauge is going to break. So we want to make certain that our distillers are properly trained in the off chance that something happens to those gauges. Now, in that receiving tank underneath the spirit fountain, there's 3 compartments, heads, hearts, and tails, of course. Heads and tails will get pumped out back. But from that 500 gallons of beer, the hearts, the good alcohol that we're able to save, there's going to be about 80 to 85 gallons of it typically. And it's different with every distiller and how they run the still, but we try to be as consistent as possible. We just all have our own little processes. So that being said, we're going to save about 85 gallons of that raw distillate. It's going to get pumped next door into our White Dog room. And from there, that's where it's going to get proofed down from that 130, 140 proof to go into a barrel legally at around 124 proof, a little bit lower if needed.
San Angelo Studios.
Now, we do get a lot of questions about what we do with our spent grain. Our spent grain that's still in there on top of that false bottom all gets pumped out back to what we call the slop tank, and we donate all of our spent grain to local cattle ranchers. Let's go over here so you can see a little bit of the White Dog room. Just watch your head. So this is our White Dog tank right here. This is where it's going to get pumped into for them to check the proof and then add water. In this part of the process, we're going to use rainwater. Remember earlier I mentioned well water, but again, that's the only process where we use the well water. Everything else we try to use rainwater for. So we've got an insane rainwater collection system on property. There's a hose at the bottom of that tank, and that hose runs out back, and that's where we fill all our barrels, which is right outside the bottling room. So from there, it goes out to one of our barns where it will age for anywhere from 3 to sometimes 9 years before it gets bottled in the next room. Let's go check that out now. Or do you have questions?
What? I don't have questions yet.
No questions yet, he says. I don't know if he's paying attention. My feelings are hurt.
Yeah. Rough.
I can make sure he didn't he was about to die right there. Wouldn't that have been something if we'd have caught that on camera?
Why was he going to die?
That was
he was going to
mean.
fall off
As
the
he
edge of
falls
there?
over. No, I had to
No, that's why there's railing. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, it wouldn't have caught him.
Don't be so dark.
I helped him.
Thank you for helping him, Patrick. Dan needs extra support sometimes. We love him.
Yeah.
That's why we're here, to support and lift him up.
Instead of him get up.
Watch,
Somebody up there to hang this.
watch. You're gonna trip.
I saw it. That's why I stopped. I'm sorry, I'm messaging the
Safety
legislation.
hazards, OSHA.
I was just asking the Spirits Guild
Watch.
guy. I know.
Jeez
I have a head.
Louise. You're gonna give me a heart attack, dude. I'm gonna be the one that dies.
Yeah. Who are these people?
That's just a cool picture they found. But these people I can name.
Yeah?
So that's Dan, the man you just met.
Oh, cool.
Right?
He's shaved.
Yeah. This is Donis, our master distiller. This man, Fred, was Dan's first employee, and he helped pretty much build this place from the ground up. So when Dan says everything is really old and needs to be upgraded, that's because Fred's the one that built it all with his own 2 hands out here. And I'm sure he had some extra help here and there, but for the most part, it was Fred and Dan and Donis putting things together.
Awesome.
This right here is JD. JD is currently our head distiller. So we have our master distiller and then our head distiller, and then Rev. Rev was one of our distillers for a long time before he moved on. So
right now, those 2 are the 2 left?
nope, JD's still with
JD's
us.
still-
Yeah,
okay.
so we've got Dan, Donis, and JD. JD's been around longer than anybody except for Donis,
Okay.
employee-wise.
Gotcha.
So, yeah. Fred retired. He got sick of us.
Yeah. He looked like he retired before he came out here. Before that picture.
Probably. He just was really good at making stuff,
Yeah.
and so Dan, I think, wrangled him in. All our beautiful rocking chairs on property for many years, he was the one that made them. And then we
Wow.
had to go find somebody to custom make them because when he said he retired, he retired.
Oh,
He was like, we're not making nothing else.
wow. That's why I have Landon around. He makes cool stuff.
Hey, watch your head on this too, okay? Let me just pad that for you like you're a child.
The corners of things, that's what I need
I believe that.
so I don't run into them.
I believe that.
I don't have that problem.
So
I never hit my head on anything.
Thank goodness. I can tell though. You clearly did not get his height.
he just hits the head on the bottom of my desk.
And then this last room here is going to be bottling. But we won't be done. This is just our last room we'll go into. Come on in.
Then we get to go to a building. Oh, lunch. We're taking a lunch break.
Yeah, it's lunchtime. You guys might want to go eat real quick. But this is bottling,
Spill
aka
something.
Party Central. All of our stuff in bottling is done by hand, and we utilize volunteers in order to help us get our product out the door. So it all starts right here with this pallet. We're going to be taking bottles off this pallet all day long. We'll rack them up, and then we'll move them over to our, what we jokingly call our redneck Bellagio, and let me show you why. No light show, no music, but, you know, still funny nonetheless. If you don't rack it just right, you get a shower you didn't expect.
Can you do that one more time? I get the height.
So we'll use that to rinse it out with some rainwater. All our glass comes pre-sanitized, but we do want to rinse it out just because sometimes it will sit in the warehouse for a couple weeks and we don't want anything to be dusty before we go to fill it. This is our only machine in this room, other than me, of course. This is Rosie. She's a little four-headed bottle filler. We've used her for quite a long time. She's our second one of this, but the other version we had was the exact same model. We call her Rosie because she looks like the maid from the Jetsons. Yeah.
Is there a backup one of those somewhere?
Yes. The original is the backup.
So if that one went down, you'd swap it out.
Yeah, but if she were to go down, we'd fix her first because 9 times out of 10 we know how to fix her.
No, how to fix it.
Yeah, yeah. So she's got an auto stop on her, which is pretty cool. So she's gonna stop on her own right at the perfect fill level. Now, once the bottle's been filled, we're gonna hand cork it. I like to just use my hand, but some people say that their palms hurt after a little while. So we've got this cool redneck corker, a little corking contraption, just helps us force that cork in all the way if we can't get it. Once we've corked it, we're gonna light check it, make sure there's nothing floating in there that doesn't belong. Bourbon drinkers aren't like wine drinkers. They don't want char or sediment left in their bottles. So we're gonna make sure there's nothing in there that doesn't belong. We're gonna double check the glass, make sure that the print is real nice and clean. It's got everything we need it to. The stars and the bands are on real pretty as well. Go ahead, Dan, you're good. We're coming that way. Yeah. Now, once we've light checked the bottle, we'll come over here.
Break that wouldn't have been applied.
And we're going to add what we call our pigtail, which is a tear strip. So a lot of companies use a piece of plastic, but we're Texans. We like to be unique. We use a piece of deerskin leather. We found it tears through our blend of wax real smooth, and if we run out, Highway 290 is 2 miles that way. No big deal. So we're gonna go ahead and we'll take our bottle. We're gonna put that pigtail right where the cork meets the glass. Now, don't try this at home. This wax is 300 degrees, but I'm kind of messy sometimes, so I got to clean up my mess. That pigtail's a little long. I'm going to trim it. Once it's been pigtailed, it's going to go into one of these crates and come down the line to the other 9 crock pots. And these are known as our dipping stations. I'll put on some safety gear, just to make sure I don't get hurt. Whoop. We've filled these crock pots, so I'm going to dip right here at our pigtail station instead. We're going to go straight down, straight back up. This is how we seal all of our bottles. We got to make sure we hold this bottle upside down for close to 2 minutes because when we flip it over, we don't want any runs or drips or air bubbles. So we're letting all that excess wax run off. We want a nice, smooth, dry finish. We want to make sure we look like the premium product that we are. I'm just pulling off some of that excess wax so when I go to flip that bottle, it doesn't run down the side. And then on the top of every bottle, we take a leather punch that's in the shape of a Texas star. I'm just going to set it right on top. It gives a really pretty impression in the wax. Now, once that bottle's been starred, it comes down the line to a second light check station. We're gonna, again, double check that liquid, but at this light check, we're gonna double check the integrity of the glass as well, because as the bottles move down the line, they bump into each other. We don't want anything to be chipped or scratched. We're also gonna double check the wax itself. We don't want any runs, drips, or air bubbles. I kind of rushed it a little bit. So this runoff right here, personally I don't like. It's passable, but we're trying to avoid anything worse than that. Now, once it's been light checked, if there's an issue, it goes across the table here to this area. We're going to call this triage. We're going to determine if we can clean it up, make it look presentable. If we can, we'll use box cutters and lighters to do so. And then everything from here on out is typically white glove treatment. So most of the time, we're going to have white gloves on both our hands, like Mickey Mouse. And we're going to use Windex and rags to clean the bottles, because we're real bougie like that, Windex and rags. Once we've cleaned those bottles, there's 2 more steps before we're done. One is that every bottle gets hand numbered on the side here. And then the other is that every bottle gets this fancy tag around the neck. This tag tends to be everybody's favorite part of the process. That's Dan Garrison, as we just met. That's his handsome face on the front. When you open it up, it's got a QR code, and that leads you to some serving suggestions, storage recommendations, information about us. None of those things are why this tag is everybody's favorite, though. This tag is our favorite because it is called a wanger. And if that's your job, you're the wanger hanger. Don't Google that, please. Once the wanger's on the neck of the bottle gets packaged up, put on a pallet, and then shipped off to liquor stores for y'all's enjoyment. I really hope you enjoy what we make. You're welcome.